Last August, I got into an argument with my stepfather and mother. I went to use the bathroom after the verbal conflict. While in the bathroom, I overheard a phone call. My stepdad, Randall Cullen, was on the phone with some type of law enforcement, I could tell. He was saying I was dangerous and needed help immediately. My mom, meanwhile, was busy playing weird music I'd never heard there before and talking about getting me in trouble soon. I had a weird feeling while in the bathroom that day as well. I felt like police would show up at any moment and arrest me. I was at their house and concluded that Randy had connections to law enforcement unknown to myself ever before that day, despite me knowing he's a psychiatrist. My mom immediately approached myself to take me back to my apartment after I got out of their bathroom. She offered me a free meal on the way back to my apartment, which was unusual based on how she offered it. When I got back to my apartment, things seemed normal. I made some food and tried to rest. Suddenly, I heard people talking from above my apartment. My place is on the top floor out of 8 stories. For people to be talking on the roof doesn't make sense to me, but their voices, or didn't make sense to me at the time, but their voices were originating from that direction. They were claiming to be law enforcement at first, FBI included, as time went on, and their threats carried on. They began threatening to rape and kill myself and my family and eat all of us, including me. Many references to cannibalism on their part were made as well, which I just covered. I realized then I was being stalked for the first time in my life. My stepfather, Randall Cullen, had either called some very bad friends he knew or hired people to stalk me. The threats were made by people nearly laughing as they said such things. One of the people's voices was familiar, however. It was my neighbor from down the hall, Tanya Nickel. She and an unfamiliar-sounding male continued to gang-stalk me with cannibalistic threats, including rape references throughout that night. I didn't know what to do. The threats became more clearly violent, and I felt threatened enough to call my father to come over. I knew not to call the police already at that point. He arrived and I left to his house. I thought a break from all of this is here now. I was wrong though. I heard Tanya's voice and threats in the car. I was trying to put it together somehow. I felt like I knew though. My stepfather, Randall Cullen, must be involved in the cult or dark corrupt practices of some kind. They wanted revenge on me and I knew it then. Tanya's threats continued in the car, accompanied by the sound of sirens. No police, fire trucks, or ambulances in sight though. I was panicking about how to ask my father and stepmother about if they had heard anything that night, or at the time. We stopped at McDonald's. Things were calm for a minute or more or so. They paid for my food, and I recognized my need to slow down and focus on basic needs. We arrived at my dad and stepmom's house. I tried to relax mentally without much success. The siren noises continued without any visible explanation. Tanya and someone else were somehow projecting their voices with threatening messages into my head or nearby without my parents hearing what they were saying to me. They were threatening to kill my family and myself at their home that night. There being my dad and stepmom's home. They were knocking on the door, it sounded like. In retrospect, it was probably only being heard in my head though, and they were threatening to arrest me too. I asked my dad and stepmom if they heard the knocking and yelling. I was fearful for my life at one point so much that I did tell my dad and stepmom that their lives and mine were in danger. We need to act now or it'll be too late, Dad, I remember saying. This probably prompted him to call my own psychiatrist the next morning. I realized this because it was rare or unusual for him and my stepmom to take me into my mental health recovery center to see Dr. B. I told him how I thought I was being stalked by my neighbor somehow. I did think she had been outside my apartment during that night. In retrospect, they were projecting remotely. Dr. B expressed concern for my mental health and suggested I take it easy that morning and from there on. I should note how he said it suspiciously and shared that Randy and Dr. B know each other somehow, and probably more than I'll ever know. They were both complicit in my stalking since last August, and now it's May 3rd, 2019, and I'm still being stalked, although very less much so. The gang stalking in my apartment continued. I lost weight. I lost my ability to focus on whatever I was doing at the time. Tanya and a different male voice were soon bothering me, including shining lights through my peephole. Lights or lasers. At one point there were shining blue lasers into my apartment somehow, possibly directed energy weapons. As I was writing this, as I'm writing this, I'm still being stalked, and it's in my apartment in Madison, Wisconsin. My stalkers give me the impression that they will never stop. At least that's what they want me to think. Soon, okay. So the stalking continued from that day. After meeting with Dr. B, I lost weight and mental stability. They were naming family members related to me without me understanding how they knew them. This still bothers me to this day. I don't know how Randy knows Tony Nickel and vice versa. Life goes on, though. I'm writing this to spread awareness against gang stalking and to save my life possibly from further harassment and mind control. Mind control is a term. Whether or not you think it's possible is kind of irrelevant, since it is possible to do. And I learned it that day when I was detained by local police and unjustly hospitalized for 2.5 weeks, restrained to a bed, and forced to listen to people condescendingly mock songs from my computer. I couldn't make all this up. So I was driven to a mental breakdown remotely that day, and this is my first video explaining it in detail. Thank you.